Welcome back to your video tour on how you can take your own journey to the extraordinary, on how you can transform every part of your life for the better when you learn and apply the 12 secrets of success. The first 6 secrets are what I call the 3P cluster, or personal peak performance. There are 6 secrets that the happiest, most content, and highest achieving people use all the time. Let me tell you about the first 3 secrets in your personal peak performance. In fact, this was studied for some time by Dr. David McClelland. He's at Harvard. He spent 25 years asking one question: what's the #1 factor in success? He said, we know it's not education. Hate to say that, being a professor by trade. But there are people out there with doctor's degrees, can't even get a job washing dishes in a restaurant. And lots of folks with a high school education doing quite well. Then he thought maybe it's IQ. If you're really smart, guarantees success. You know that's not the case. There are lots of bright folks who sit on their butts doing nothing. Lots of average ones go a long ways. So he said, what is it? 25 years of research. #1 thing, top of the list, this thing called self-esteem. He said, we now know that nobody ever outperforms their own self-image. You don't become a better mother, father, manager, executive, hockey player, computer coach, whatever the job might be. Nobody ever outperforms their own self-image. That's one of the most important things learned the last 25 years in psychology. Difficulty is, you can spend 25 years building up a great self-esteem, and some jerk can rip it apart in 15 minutes. How do you keep it strong all the time? As an example, some of you might know the name Viktor Serebryakov. A few years ago, he was 16 years of age. He was seated in his high school classroom. Teacher walked over and said, Victor, hate to tell you this, but you're a big, stupid dummy. Sitting in my classroom, wasting my time. You learn nothing. Why don't you drop out of school, get some job, so you can support yourself? I don't know how that makes you feel, but it upsets me when teachers talk to kids that way. Well, here he sits back and thinks, well, she must be right. She's a teacher, I'm a student, I'm a dummy. Takes her advice, drops out of school. The next 16 years, travels across the country as a bum. 100 jobs in 16 years. Hitches a ride to some town, gets a job washing dishes, gets fired. Goes to the next town, gets a job sweeping floors, gets fired. 100 jobs, 16 years. And he said every single morning, I get up and tell myself, you're a dunce, you're a dunce, you're a dunce. Teacher said it first. No, he told himself the same thing. Said I would dress this dunce in the morning. I'd shave the dunce. I'd go to work as a dunce, act like a dunce, be treated like a dunce. But after 16 years of that, an amazing thing happened. Some psychologists were taking an IQ test and said, let's take this bum off the railway tracks. See how smart he is compared to average people like us. Gave him an IQ test. Found out his IQ was 175 points, which isn't too bad. He wasn't a dunce, absolute genius. He'd all of a sudden go to college, vocational school, get some credits. But that one piece of feedback changed his whole life. He said he got up the next morning. Instead of saying he was a dunce, got up and said, hey man, you're a genius. He said, I dressed this genius. I shaved this genius. I walked like a genius, talked like a genius. I wasn't cocky, I wasn't arrogant, but I knew there was something good inside of me. It didn't take too long, changing the thought from dunce to genius. His whole life began to change. He began to invent things. He now has several patents with the U.S. government. He has his own corporation. He's the head of it, multimillionaire. You can find his books on Amazon.com. Not too long ago, elected international president of the Mensa Society. And only one requirement to be in that group, a IQ of at least 140. What's the point of self-esteem? One sentence wraps it all up. You perform exactly as you seek yourself. You see yourself as a dunce, perform that way. See yourself as a genius, perform that way. When you come to my Journey to the Extraordinary program, I'll teach you what I call the lasting system. 7 keys for unshakable self-esteem that sticks with you in the good times and the bad. So the first secret is self-esteem. The second secret is purpose. If you don't know what you stand for, you'll fall for anything. And unfortunately, a lot of folks never quite figure out their purpose. They go through lives saying things like this: I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. How sad, how pathetic. The person that turned me on to the power of purpose was Dr. Viktor Frankl. You might know the story. He was a young Jewish psychiatrist during World War II. Because he was Jewish, shipped off to the Auschwitz concentration camp. In this horrible place of deprivation, torture, and starvation. Lots of folks, of course, died, got sick, were murdered, were burned. But as a physician, he noticed some people survived and others didn't. And he asked the obvious question, why? Why do some make it and others not? He thought the younger folks' prime of life, 20, 30 years of age, would have stronger constitutions, could last longer physically. Not what he found. What he found was this: those who had an overwhelming purpose, something along this line, whatever it takes. I will survive this camp to find my wife again, my husband again, my kids, if at all possible. And that sense of purpose kept him alive in the worst of conditions. When the Allies came in and opened up the concentration camps, there were some survivors. Dr. Frankl, one of them. He soon moved to California, spent his life writing books and lecturing around the country. His key book was called Man's Search for Meaning. If you never read it, probably should. It'll change your life. But his main sentence was this: if you know your why, if you know your purpose, anyhow is possible. That's how powerful purpose is. When Dr. Frankl got too old to write books and give lectures, the focus turned to Dr. Karl Menninger, the leading psychiatrist in the United States. He was giving a keynote address one time to 5,000 psychologists and psychiatrists. After the presentation, time for question and answer. Somebody said, Dr. Menninger, if you were to meet a person about to have a nervous breakdown, what would you advise them to do? They all thought he would say, well, get professional help. In other words, they wanted him to pat them on the back for choosing that profession. But Dr. Menninger surprised them. He said, well, if I were to meet a person about to have a nervous breakdown, I'd tell them to go out and help somebody, because they almost always get healthy. In other words, when you take the focus off yourself and your own problems, when you focus on a purpose of making a difference in the world, you almost always get healthy. So the second secret we're talking about today is purpose. Don't live like those folks who say, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. In the journey, I'll show you exactly what it takes to figure out your purpose and then live on purpose. The third secret for your own personal peak performance is goals and affirmations. You see, I believe you were born to win, but conditioned to fail. I don't believe that God makes anybody to be a loser, to scrape by in the belly of the earth and barely survive. You were born to achieve some success, to find some joy. But the reason so many folks don't do that, if you read psychology, they all agree on one thing: the average person uses 5, maybe 10% of their ability. 90% of their potential never gets tapped, never gets utilized. Why so? Because they're conditioned to fail. I remember Jean-Henri Fabre. He was a French naturalist. He was known for studying an insect called the processionary caterpillar. They were called that because you line them up in a procession, they would follow each other almost forever. In one of his experiments, he took a flower pot, filled it with pine needles, the main food of the processionary caterpillar, Line them up around the base of the flower pot. I want to see what they would do. They began to crawl around and around the flower pot, hour after hour, day after day, never stopped crawling till the 7th day. They all dropped dead of starvation and exhaustion. Now you may think, that's pretty silly. They starved to death when 2 inches from their nose was all the food they needed. At any time, they could have stopped their crawling, got inside the flower pot, nibbled some needles, got back in line. But they made a fatal mistake. The same mistake a lot of people make. They confused activity with accomplishment. You see, you're active, you're busy, I'm busy. We're all busy. Who isn't active and crazy busy in today's world? But the reason people confuse activity and accomplishment is they may not have clear, meaningful, specific, written goals. Without meaningful, specific goals, you can be as busy as you want to be, highly active, not have much to show for it. In the journey, I'll teach you how to get exactly what you want to achieve, to get rid of that old-fashioned programming and achieve your goals on and off the job. It's an exciting process to learn. That concludes the first 3 secrets of success. As a bonus, you have access to me throughout this entire tour. Simply email me at Alan, A-L-A-N, at drzimmerman.com, and I'll personally respond. I look forward to hearing from you. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.